Hello, and welcome to this online broadcast on the 2015 edition of the ISO 9000 and ISO 9001 Quality Management System Standards. My name is Maria Lasarte, and I'm ISO Social Media Manager. Now that the two standards are in the final stages of their revision, I'm here with 4 experts who will tell you everything that you need to know about these new editions. To give you a little bit of background, ISO 9001 was first published in 1987, and since then has been used by organizations worldwide to show that they can offer consistently good quality products and services, as well as to streamline processes and to become more efficient. Now, to ensure that the standard is up to date with modern needs, experts from over 80 countries have spent the last 3 years working hard to revise the standard, and we expect some important changes. Now, I'm here with 4 of those experts. We have Nigel Croft. Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
He's the chair of the ISO subcommittee that is responsible for ISO 9001, and he's joined us in Google Hangouts before. We also have Lorri Hunt. Hi, Lorri. And José Dominguez, who's joining us from Mexico as well. And both of them are interim conveners of the working group that is revising ISO 9001. We also have the pleasure to have Paul Pons with us, and he is the chair of the ISO subcommittee that is revising ISO 9000.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Now let's start with what everybody's been waiting for. What are the main changes between the previous edition of ISO 9001, that is the 2008 version, and the current edition as it stands today? Nigel, perhaps you can tell us about the most important changes?
Yes, certainly. I think, first of all, it's important for everybody to recognize that what we're doing with the new version of ISO 9001, and indeed ISO 9000, it's not a revolution. It's an evolutionary process. You mentioned that all of it started back in the early 1980s when work on the 1987 version of the standard started. We know that the 1987 version of the standard and the small modifications in 94 were very prescriptive. They were very much focused on manufacturing industry, large-scale businesses. In the year 2000, we moved away from that towards what we call the process approach, where the key objective was to manage processes to achieve the intended outcomes of those processes and to document those to the extent needed in order to be able to manage them. Well, I would say that in the 2015 version of ISO 9001, we've taken that one step further. So you will find that ISO 9001 2015 is very, very much performance-based. It's really concentrating on helping organizations to deliver on that promise that ISO 9001 makes right in the introductory clauses, that this standard is intended to provide confidence in an organization's ability to consistently provide products and services that meet customer needs and expectations. Now, in fact, the revision, you mentioned the 3 years that people have been working on the revision. It's actually longer than that because José and Lorri, in fact, were involved in a group that we put together in 2010 to look at what we call the future concepts in quality management. And so that group was looking at the strategic direction of where we might be taking ISO 9001. So they were looking at things like this concept, output matters. Are the processes actually delivering on their promise? Are they consistently, when taken together as a whole, allowing an organization to be able to produce consistent, conforming products and services? They were looking at what we call now risk-based thinking. To what extent could we or should we be incorporating this question of risk into the quality management system? And should we only be looking at it from a negative point of view? Shouldn't we also be thinking about how an organization can be agile and look for opportunities and balance those opportunities against the risks that may be implicit with taking those opportunities? So all of those things taken together provided inputs into the new revision of 9001 2015. We also had a very high-level group from my subcommittee, SC2, and Paul Palmer's subcommittee, SC1, revisiting the quality management principles on which ISO 9001 and indeed ISO 9004 are based. And they came back with a series of recommendations, essentially keeping the same, re-endorsing the principles pretty much as they were, with some changes and some sort of nuances in the change of direction. Another important input came from the ISO strategic imperative that all the different management systems of ISO needed to get their heads together and come up with a consistent look, touch, and feel for ISO's management system standards. The result of all of that was what is now called Annex SL to the ISO directives, and the idea is to allow organizations who choose to implement ISO 9001, ISO 14001, other standards such as health and safety, energy management, and so on, into a single coherent system. Those who choose to do so will be able to do that. So when we talk about the changes that people will see, the first major change that people will see when they look at the new standard is that it looks different. The clause structure is different, but on the other hand, it also has an identical clause structure to the new ISO 14001. And so we feel it will help in the harmonization efforts. At the high level, I'll let Lorri and José go into the more details, but I would say at the high level, what we've tried to achieve, and I'm very proud and very pleased with the work that the working groups have actually done, and I'm very proud to be associated with the new standard. It's three things taken together in synergy. Number one, the process approach that was so successful in the 2000-2008 versions, that is maintained. How to manage an organization's activities as a set of coherent processes working together to achieve the desired outcomes. Second, what we talk about, risk-based thinking. That doesn't necessarily mean formal risk management or formal risk assessments, though it could do, depending on the context of the organization. Some processes are more important than others. Some have a greater impact on the desired result than others. Some we need to concentrate more energy, more effort, more resources, have more disciplined documented procedures, checklists, work instructions, and so on in order to manage them. Others we can be more relaxed and more flexible about because the potential for bad consequences as a result of something going wrong in those processes may be lower. That's what we mean by risk-based thinking, and that permeates throughout the standard. And that really, although we don't use the words preventive action anymore in the new standard, the risk-based thinking idea means that the whole standard is now focusing on preventing bad things from happening and looking for opportunities to leverage the good things that can happen, maybe new technologies, it may be possibilities for new markets, and so on. And then finally, on top of all of that, plan, do, check, act. That is the fundamental route by which organizations can seek to improve their performance by, first of all, planning to do things right in the first place, which is where the risks and opportunities part comes in, by correcting things that go wrong, looking for the need for corrective action, and making improvements, not only by small step continual improvements like Kaizen, but also we want to make sure that we stimulate but don't oblige organizations to innovate and to make breakthrough improvements. And so that whole structure now is more flexible in terms of how to do things, but much more rigid in terms of what to be achieved. What to be achieved, consistent, conforming products and services that meet the needs and expectations of the customers.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that. That's a very clear update on what's new. But ISO 9001 is not the only standard that is being updated. ISO 9000 as well is quite important, as it explains the concepts and the language that is used throughout the ISO 9000 family of standards. Paul, perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the standards, who should be using it, and what's new on the 2015 edition.
You know, if anyone has ever been in an argument, everyone knows that within that argument, words really matter. The words that you use can either make or break your ability to be understood. And I'm supposing that there are many on this, in this event that have been in the position of having to argue with an auditor, or perhaps a top manager, regarding a particular concept having to do with quality management, or a specific word that everyone seems to understand, but they understand it in different ways. What is essentially the grounding mechanism for an organization and individuals within that organization to truly understand the intent of all these words that are surrounding us within the new structure that Nigel just mentioned? Words and phrases such as context of the organization, interested parties. What do we really mean by that? I mean, after all, it's okay to say interested parties, but we could also say stakeholders. We could also say shareholders. Who is an interested party? The purpose of ISO 9000 is to try to clarify those concepts and those terms and definitions. Clarify them in a way that anyone can understand these terms and phrases. And it's important to note that we do so in absolute harmony with ISO 9001 and those who are involved in the writing of that document. We work as a team. Our task group on terminology works directly with representatives of Working Group 24, developing ISO 9001. When they come to a point that the existing term is now in conflict with a new concept. So, for example, an earlier term in 2005, the edition of ISO 9000, now becomes problematic as we work toward a new structure and, again, using new concepts. So there is a give and take where the group in terminology tries to explain the meaning behind the existing definition and then has to cope with the new potential, the new application of that word. At the end, you end up with a high sense of consensus. You have to, after all, get this done. And, for example, the term risk. There are over 40 definitions of risk within the ISO family of documents management systems. But for ISO 9000, 9001, risk is the effect of uncertainty. It's a very basic, straightforward definition. I think it's 3.17 for those who follow me. But we work closely together because clause 2 of ISO 9001 speaks to what's called a normative reference. And it explains that a normative reference is indispensable, there's an interesting word, for the application of ISO 9001. Now, I would suspect that there are some on this, in this event that if I were to ask them what does normative mean, we might get a response that might say, well, it's how you normally use the phrase or how you normally use the term. Well, I'll give you partial credit. But normative reference means it's indispensable. You really need to have 9001 in one hand and 9000 in the other, especially when you come to a point where your auditor says, oh, well, this means this. You can now say, well, it's right here that it means this. It's indispensable to the application of ISO 9001 that folks use ISO 9000, understand ISO 9000, and apply its principles. For example, within ISO 9000, we not only deal with terms and definitions, but remember Nigel mentioned the quality management principles. There are now 7. But the changes, even though subtle, brought a lot of good new information, which essentially transformed what previously was within ISO 9000 regarding the fundamentals. The same is true with the beginning of Section 2 regarding the quality management concepts and those things such as what is quality. We have a new document, is what I'm trying to say. And it's one that is indispensable, normative to ISO 9001. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. It's true that language and terminology are very, very important when it comes to standards. The final vote in ISO 9001 will only close tomorrow, and of course we will announce the results later this week. But it would be interesting to know, how did we get to where we are now? Lorri, you can tell us about the revision process a little bit more and how this has shaped the standard as we see it today.
Sure, Maria. When we were starting the revision process, and Nigel addressed some of this already in the fact that we had future concepts, and we started working on the standard very early in the game. And what I would tell you is that this allowed us to really hit the ground running. We didn't have to debate things because they had been debated for 2 or 3 years in advance. And I think especially when it came to risk-based thinking, risk means so many different things. Paul just gave us the technical definition by ISO 9001, but it's very important for us to know what it meant from our standard. And so these papers were very critical for us being successful. You have to remember that we have, like Maria said, 80 countries working on this. And there were at most usually 60 people in the room. And so when you're looking at those 60 people trying to come to a consensus on where this document needs to go forward, we really needed a roadmap to do that. And for us, that became a design specification. Our working group is probably one of the first that did it. I think others do it now. But that design specification really laid out to us what were the critical points we needed to address. And there were a few. One of them was the last big revision had been done in the year 2000. And you look at the way we do business today versus how we did it when we started drafting the standard in the late 90s, that is so different. We have so much more automation. We have so much more smart systems in our own organizations, and that's why you see things like documented information changing because of those changes in technology. We also had to understand that there needed to be there was a desire for the document to be auditable, but at the same point in time, we're writing a standard that's not necessarily for certification purposes, but that can be audited. And what I would say to that is there's a lot of individuals out there right now that if you went back to the year 2000 transition and you ask them, do you understand this requirement? Is it going to be easy to audit? They would say no. And you ask them about that requirement today, and they would say it's not a big deal. So I think that was part of the one of the inputs that we had. And then we wanted to make sure we allowed that when we made a change to a document that we did not automatically obsolete it in 2 years by making it so prescriptive that it did not allow for dynamic change in an organization. So those were some of the inputs to the design specification. We also did a survey in the 2009-2010 timeframe where we went out to our stakeholders and we asked them, what do you think about these future concepts? So not only did the working group experts write these papers, we went out and asked, what are the things you're most interested in? And that's why you see things like risk-based thinking and organizational knowledge, which is a new requirement in the standard, so adopted in the 2015 version, because that's what the user population wanted. And then, of course, we have our regular review cycles through committee drafts and the Draft International Standard alone, where we received over 3,000 comments that the organizations listened to the member bodies for their feedback, but in many times those member bodies were also out there seeking information from their own individual constituents in their mirror committees. And then finally, we did some validation activities. Validation is there to prove that that it's understood, and of course there's always going to be a learning curve, but those changes where it made sense were incorporated into the final draft international standard, and I think are a good roadmap for even some of the communications work that we're doing internationally, making sure that users understand some of the intent. There's a great package that's available on ISO's website that provides information to users out there. But just in summary, we received a lot of feedback, analyzed that, developed consensus, and I think have an excellent product going forward.
Thank you very much, Lorri. It sounds like it was a very exhaustive work that the committee has done on this standard, and that ISO members have played a key role in helping make this happen. But what I'm sure you're all wondering now is what's next, especially for those of you that are already using the 2008 edition. What does this a new standard mean to you? So perhaps José, you could tell us a little bit more about the transition process.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I hope my English is good. My Spanish is much better, but one of the things I would recommend to you guys is that, as already Nigel and Lorri and Paul had said, it's very important that you read and study both the standards. That's the first task. Don't try to do something before you read carefully both the standards, to understand the new concepts, to understand the link between some of the terms that, as Paul already said, SC1 had a very, very tough job trying to come with a new definition of the new approach for certain terms. And that interaction that we have between with the guys drafting the standard in Working Group 24, with SC1 Working Group 1, who is the responsible of terminology, we have a very big time trying to come out with something good. The other thing is important in reading the standard. You will find out that the scope of the current ISO 9001 2008 and the 2015 version is almost the same. I mean, we really developed the same standard, the same scope. It hasn't changed. The process approach, as Nigel said at the beginning, is there. So there's nothing new. We can say that the process approach is like reloaded, is like improved in the way that we develop ISO 9001. I think that the key points new, as Lorri already said and Nigel said, is that we're embracing a new structure of the standard, different chapters, different way the standard put together. We're embracing the risk-based thinking. And as Nigel said, don't get into very complicated stuff. I think that the key thing here is that everybody in the organization understands that what can go wrong, what can happen that results in the organization not achieving their intended results. And this is the common ground for the risk-based thinking. And also one of the key things that the new standard is requesting us is some more engagement of top management. So that's, I think, also one of the key major breakthroughs and major steps that ISO 9001 is doing, getting more engagement from top management. Once you complete that reading, my recommendation is that you guys identify gaps, identify what is new, identify what is really already there in terms of what you already have in your system. It's important in this analysis involve all process owners and also top management coming together to understand how the new requirements fits together with the current structure, current system, current organization processes. Then, doing that analysis, it's important that you establish a project plan. That project plan will be key in order to achieve common awareness, common understanding, of the new requirements and the new concepts. Perhaps you will need to provide some training, you need to provide some update to the auditors, you need to do that. And also together when that project plan of implementation is coming along the way, it's important to liaise with your certification body to define how the transition will take place. Also, I recommend that you look to the transition guidance plan that was put together with and approved by IIF, that is the International Accreditation Forum, and CASCO, that is the branch of ISO in terms of conformity assessment. So this, they approve a transition period for 3 years. 3 years starting on the date of publication of ISO 9001. This means that organizations currently certified in ISO 9001-2008, they will have almost 3 years to complete the transition. So that's something important that I recommend to look to this guidance document. Is available for everybody in the public. You can get it in the IF website, and also it's a link in the SC2 website and also on the ISO website for this information. The other common important thing on this transition period time is that you can renovate your certification on 2008 during these 3 years period time. The only difference is that the validity of the certificate will be no longer the end of the 3-year transition period time. So that's what I recommend, Maria, to the users, is that first, read the standards. It's very important. Identify the gaps on a multidisciplinary approach. It's not one guy activity. It has to be all the process owner involved and top management doing this analysis. Establish a project plan. Understand the transition, official transition plan approved by ISO and CASCO, and go ahead and start going, and also keep contact with the information available at ISO website, the SC2 website, and also IIF website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose, for that very sound advice for our viewers and for users of the standard. Now we are opening up the floor to questions. If anybody has a question, just leave them on this page here, or tweet with the hashtag ISO 9001 2015. We already have received some questions, so I will start. Would you recommend that somebody already starts their training in 2008, or do they edition, or do you wait for the 2015 edition to take some training? Maybe Jose, since you've been talking about the recommendations, you can take this one.
First, to really understand what you need to know, what you need to get. First, if I recommend perhaps to get an overview of what is new, what is changed in the standard. I think that could be the first step before getting involved with more specific training activities within the organization. Also important is to identify who is going to provide the training, what are the capacities, the competencies that they can provide. There are organizations that right now they are very, very strong in internal resources. I mean, they have people who have been involved in the quality management system in their own organizations for many years. So perhaps that training could happen within the internal resources of the organizations. I think the key thing is, again, is read the standard, check what we have, what we don't have, and based on that analysis, we can identify we really need to have an external resource as a training provider coming to our organization, or sending some people out to an open enrollment session that already happening in the market. There's a lot of offering about training on the changes on ISO 9001.
If I could just add to that very briefly, Maria, because I had the advantage of seeing the question written. Basically, the answer would be, don't bother doing any training to the 2008 version of the standard. The new 2015 version will be out imminently within the next week or so. So my advice to anybody who's new to it, concentrate on 2015 version. 2008 will continue to be valid for another 3 years, but essentially if you're new to the standard, start with the latest version.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you
right.
for that, both Nigel and Jose. I have a couple more questions here. One question is, do you need to have a previous certificate to 9001 if you want to apply for the 2015 edition? That is one question. The second question is there more responsibility for top management in this new edition of ISO 9001?
I can take that, Maria. You don't have to have a previous certificate. You know, you can start from scratch for 9001 2015. I would not recommend that you go to 2008 first. I think if you're new to an organization, you should do 2015. And regarding the second question, does top management have more responsibility? Absolutely. The previous standard, you know, and there's been a lot of debate and discussion related to top management and the term management representative. But the term management representative really lent itself to saying we have one individual responsible for our quality management system. And the way the standard reads now is there's more requirements for top management, and it's not one person's responsibility, it's the responsibility of all of management. Some organizations may feel like they're going to struggle with that. They like that go-to position. They can still do that, but ultimately all of management's going to have to know what's going on and be involved and engaged in the management system.
Thank you, Lorri, for that.
Let me add something quickly, Maria. And also one of the important things on the new requirements is that one of the expectations is that top management becomes a real promoter. He needs to understand important concepts and like process approach, like risk-based thinking, in order to do a promotion activity within their organization, in order to engage with the people in their organization, in order to achieve the intended results. At the end, he's accountable for the effectiveness of the management system, the QMS. So it's very, very important that top management take it very, very seriously, that recommendation of Paul at the beginning, to understand the concepts, to understand what this means in terms of quality management is very, very, very important.
Thank you, Jose. We'll continue with the questions. I see there is a question that is asking whether the ISO, well, the leadership behind the 9001 and 9000 standards, do they have anything to gain personally from this work? Perhaps, Nigel, you can take that one, yes?
Yeah, sure. You know, as leadership, I guess the chair of the subcommittee counts as the top leadership. I have an awful lot to gain with the new publication of ISO 9001, and that really means an awful lot in terms of personal satisfaction, because I think nobody is involved in standards writing for financial gain. I'm certainly not, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree with that. Of course, everybody who does take part, we dedicate a lot of our time and a lot of our energy on a pro bono basis. Yes, some of the people who are involved in writing the standards are consultants. They're consultants because they are experienced people who've worked in industry. You know, I look at Lorri, many years working for Honeywell, and I don't think she's actually allowed to tell us what she did at Honeywell, if I'm correct, Lorri. You know, I look at Paul, a lot of time in industry. These are experienced people who are now sharing that experience with the community as a whole. You may argue there may be some financial indirect gain from that, but certainly, speaking for myself, you know, I'm not financially motivated by any of this. I do it because I feel it's a way to give something back to the standards, give something back to industry, the same way that personally I'm also involved in a lot of pro bono work in the social responsibility arena, in the fair trade arena, and a lot of other things. So I think, you know, anybody who starts trying to imply that anybody here is in it for financial gain, quite honestly, that doesn't bear out.
Thank you, Nigel, for that.
If I may, I fully agree, Nigel. I also remember that someone told me at one time that standards are written by those who show up. And I think that's a remarkable statement. We show up because we're dedicated to this whole concept of trying to create systems and develop concepts that help organizations trade with each other. And none of this, even though there may be an occasional speaking engagement or something, none of this was ever done with the idea that we were going to make a lot of money out of it, because we certainly don't. This is a net loss, but it's a loving loss. I think that's the point. So thank you, Nigel. That was well said.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Nigel. And yes, we are very grateful for the work that the volunteers are doing. The experts that develop ISO standards around the world are volunteering their time and effort to create these standards that really help society, help world trade, and have a great impact on our day-to-day life. Now, to continue with the questions, because we are running out of time and we only have a few more minutes left, I have received the question saying whether an organization that is certified to the 2008 edition will automatically pass to the 2015 edition. Perhaps Nigel?
Yep, I can do it, and I think the answer is very short and sweet. It depends on the approach they've taken to implementing the quality management system. You know, quality management system, whether it's 9001, 2008, or 2015, it's not all about certification. It shouldn't be all about certification. It's about organizations implementing robust quality management systems that help them to achieve their objectives. An organization that's gone about it in the right way, using the 2008 version of the standard, should have no problems at all. That doesn't mean they won't have to do anything, but they should have no problems at all in migrating to the new version of the standard. Those who've taken a sort of reactive minimalist approach, saying, you know, what's the minimum I have to do to get the certificate? And oh my goodness, you know, these idiots at ISO have, you know, come up with a new set of requirements. We're going to have to change our documentation. That very reactionary kind of approach, they will have difficulty, because the new standard, let's be very clear, it makes organizations think for themselves about their own business and about their own business context and how they run that business.
Thank you very much for that question, Nigel. I mean, I have another question here asking whether they are ready to the system and they don't know whether to go for the 2008 or the 2015 edition. And I'm guessing from what I've heard so far that they should just go for the 2015 edition. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So another question that I have received, and actually I can help with that, is when will the new publication be available? So we're still waiting on the close of the voting, which will only take place tomorrow. And then based on the results of that, the publication would be on the 23rd of September if everything goes well. I mean, the official date of publication will be earlier, but it will only be available from the end of September onwards. And then what else do we have? I think actually we've run out of time, so I would like to thank all of you, José, Lorri, Nigel, and Paul, for your great contributions and for being here. I know there's still questions left, so I urge everybody who's watching to keep an eye on the ISO 9001 2015 hashtag, because together with our members, we will be sharing some informative brochures and other content in the upcoming days, as well as any updates on how the publication is going. And if you have any questions, please contact your ISO members at iso.org/ISO-members. Well, thank you, everybody. I take this opportunity as well to announce that this Friday, 11th September at 2 p.m. Central European Time, we will have a tweet chat on the 2015 edition of ISO 14001, which has also been recently approved. So please log into Twitter, send us your questions, and they will be answered live by Anne-Marie Warris, who is the chair of the subcommittee that revised ISO 14001. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. And
Thank you.
so, yeah, goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.